Hello and welcome to another FilterGrade tutorial. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to properly use the HSL sliders in Adobe Lightroom. Alright, so I'm already in Lightroom here, looking at a photo taken in Jasper National Park in Canada. This is a good photo to show how to use the hue, saturation, luminance sliders because it's got a decent amount of color in it. If your photo is less saturated or only has a handful of specific colors, then you're going to be limited to how much you can affect with the hue, saturation, luminance sliders. But because this photo has got a lot of greens, a lot of blues, a little bit of yellow in there, we'll have a lot of control in manipulating the colors. So as you can see, I've already done the basic adjustments here. It's always important to get your exposure right before you go into the hue, saturation, and luminance sliders. The HSL sliders should never be your first step whenever you edit a photo in your workflow. If you use the HSL slider first, then go and do your basic exposure adjustments, it's going to change the look of the colors and you have to go back and redo everything you just did. Go through and get your basic adjustments over with, get your exposure right, and then move on to the HSL. So I've done a bit of highlight, shadows, whites, blacks manipulation here, not a huge deal. The contrast, however, will affect the saturation. If you up the contrast, your bright parts of your photo will become brighter, and the dark parts of your photo will become darker, so just take that into consideration when you're editing a photo. I've also done a little bit of clarity and vibrance adjustments. I don't want to touch the saturation just yet because I want to more accurately choose specifically which colors I want saturated rather than the entire photo itself. I've given a bit of vibrance boosting just because that's how I like to edit my photos. I like a good vibrant scene. So let's go down to the actual HSL sliders. So you've got three options: HSL, color, and B&W or black and white. This black and white tab is obviously if you want to make your photo black and white. It's great. It gives you a lot of ability to edit how dark or bright each color is going to be represented in this photo, but we won't get into that in this video. If you go into the color tab here, this is just really another way of viewing the HSL sliders. So what this does is let you focus specifically on one color at a time, or you can hit all. You can manipulate one single color with all three categories of hue, saturation, and luminance. I personally like to go into the HSL tab. And again, there's a couple options here. You can edit just the hue, just the saturation, or just the luminance. I like to view it in all, just so I can see how each color is interacting with one another, whether it's in the hue, saturation, and luminance. I just find this to give me all the information at once, so I can address and respond to how colors are being represented in the photo. Now, Lightroom has this editing layout because this is how color can be defined and measured. All colors can be given a numeric value under the three categories: hue, saturation, and luminosity. If you're a professional photographer or colorist, or if you really value accurate color grading, then you should really look into more advanced color theory. But for this video, we're just going to be going into how to effectively use this powerful tool in Lightroom. So the first section of the HSL sliders, which is hue, what this essentially does is it changes the color of your colors. So in this photo here, there's not a lot of red to begin with. So if I move it around, you can't see a whole lot of difference. You can always double tap on the text of the color, or you can double tap hue to reset everything back to 0. So if I do like this, double click, and that will reset the orange, double click on the hue, it'll reset everything back to 0. You can usually tell where the colors in the photo are, but if you have an issue with that, you can always click this little circle button here. What that does is it gives you a color picker crosshair so that you can hover over any aspect of the photo. And as you can see on my right hand side here, these will be highlighted before I even click. So if I click right here in the blue and I drag down, it's going to move my blue hue slider down towards the turquoise or the aqua. In the same way, if I scroll up by clicking, holding, and sliding up, and that will take my blue more towards the purples. So I'll double click that. So I'm going to go ahead and just edit this how I see fit. I generally like to start off by moving the blue, manipulating the sky to a more appealing color. I like to bring the blues down and maybe the aquas up on occasion. Not a lot of aqua in this photo, but you can see it moving a bit. I'm going to go all the way to the right because I want it to be more towards the blues. Purple, there's not a ton of purple in this photo. Generally, you can find this in the shadows of your image, but for this sake, I might just do a little left on purple, right on magenta, kind of to bring the magentas more into the reds. And the reds, I like to bring it to the right or towards orange, just to give it more of a sunset feel. I like to pull the oranges more orange or red, and the yellow, it really depends on what's in the photo. I like to move it to the left here just because it gives you that more of a teal orange look that's very popular, and blue and orange are opposites on the color wheel, making for a nice looking photo. You can see already before and after. Besides the exposure adjustments, the colors themselves have really changed. After I get my hue correct to where I like it, I then move on to the saturation. So what the saturation does is changes the intensity of the colors. So if you want a really blue, all you have to do is just click and bring it up. As you can see, very saturated, but if I bring it more towards the left, a lot of the color is going to be gone. I tend to bring my saturation on the sky up because I know later on I'm going to bring the luminance of the sky up as well. So what that does is just gives me a little extra color to work with later on. I do want to up the saturation of the greens because there's a lot of foliage and trees in this photo, so I will bring that up. So it does not matter in what order you move these sliders around in. This is just how I do it. I like to edit the most obvious colors first. So the blues, the greens, maybe a little bit of yellow, orange, and then I'll go down to the purple, magenta, the aqua, the colors that aren't so dominant in this photo. So as you can see, if I move the red, there's not a lot happening when I do this. That just means there's not a lot of red in the photo to begin with, so I'll maybe just up it just because if there are any reds, I do want them to come out a little bit. Bring the orange up as well, give it more of a warm feel, and same with the yellows. A lot of this is just creative preference. Finally, on the luminance slider, this changes how bright each color is. So to really obviously show this, I will go and use the blue here. And as I move it to the right, increasing the brightness of the blues in the photo. And again, you can click this little circle button and click any aspect of the photo and you can brighten it up. Maybe down here, there's some orange there. There's yellow and orange there. Greens, a little blue in there in the shadows. So I personally like a nice bright sky. So I'll go and move up the aqua and the blue, just because it's more of a natural look. If you're outside on a clear day, it's gonna be pretty bright if you look up. So I want my photos to reflect that. And from here, you can adjust the magenta purple as well. There isn't really any magenta or purple in this photo. I like to bring the brightness up anyway, just so that if there are any purple or magenta tones in there, it'll just naturally brighten the photo up a bit. Same with the red. If you go left and right, you can always tell what parts of the photo are being affected. Don't be afraid to explore and really test these sliders and see what they can do and their capabilities. However, you should be cautious about going to extremes. What I mean by this is very opposing colors on hue and saturation, not so much in the luminance. But if you go to the right and then to the left and then to the right and then to the left, things will start looking fake, or you'll even start to get color banding in the sky, especially just because there's a lot of it. There's a lot of space up there that shows the color. You won't notice this so much in the yellows or the greens just because they're very small and they're separated by darker colors. So I'm pretty satisfied with what I've done here in the hue, saturation, luminance sliders. I might go back up to the top, and then depending on what I've done below, I might globally decrease the saturation or increase it. It depends on the mood and the tone, the vibe, the whole creative feel that you're trying to accomplish here. But I'm pretty satisfied with this photo right now. From here, I might go to split toning, detail, and finish up this photo. But for the most part, all my colors are looking the way I want them to. I'm really satisfied with how they came out. If you're finding that the hue, saturation, luminance sliders are still pretty complicated and you don't quite understand how they work, I would highly recommend downloading some presets. This is where you will find a lot of the preset work occurs. The majority of the time, these presets are to give a specific color profile or color tone. A lot of this will be displayed within this HSL slider. There are so many combinations you can do within this HSL slider. So what I'd highly recommend is you just get into Lightroom, practice editing with these sliders, use different types of photos, use some portraits, use some landscapes, see how the colors interact with one another and how the hue, saturation, and luminance affect one another. Alright, so there you have it, how to use the HSL sliders in Adobe Lightroom. And as always, for the best Photoshop actions, Lightroom presets, and video LUTs, check out FilterGrade.com.